Daniel Taylor pushed through the sleek glass doors of Whitman Elite Fitness, the blast of cool air from the gym's powerful AC washing over him as he stepped into the polished lobby. His stride was deliberate, each step echoing with purpose. This wasn't just any gym, it was the crown jewel of fitness centers in town, with cutting-edge equipment, a loyal clientele, and a reputation that gleamed as brightly as its chrome machines. For months, Daniel had been setting aside every spare dollar, dreaming of the day he'd train here, ready to elevate his workouts to new heights. Today was that day or so, he thought. At the front desk, a young woman in a pristine white polo glanced up from her computer. Her smile flickered, just for a moment. As Daniel approached, "Hi," he said, offering a warm nod. "I'm here to ask about a membership." His voice was deep, steady, carrying the quiet confidence of someone who knew exactly what he wanted. The receptionist's smile tightened, her eyes darting to the side. "1 second," she murmured, picking up the phone and whispering into it. Moments later, Derek Whitman, the gym's owner, emerged from a back office, stocky and in his late 40s. Derek carried himself with the swagger of a man used to getting his way. His designer polo and tailored gym shorts screamed money, but his set jaw hinted at a history of winning arguments. His gaze swept over Daniel quick, dismissive. But Daniel caught the undercurrent. He'd seen that look before, the one that sized him up and found him wanting before he'd even opened his mouth. "Can I help you?" Derek asked, stepping behind the counter with an air of impatience, like Daniel was already wasting his time. Daniel extended a hand, his smile polite but firm. "Daniel Taylor, I've heard great things about this place and I'm looking to join." Derek's eyes flicked to Daniel's hand, hesitating just long enough to make the moment uncomfortable before shaking it. His grip was tight, but there was no warmth in it. "We're very particular here," Derek said, his tone clipped, already leaning toward rejection. "Our memberships aren't just about lifting weights. We cultivate a specific vibe, a certain kind of experience." Daniel's smile didn't waver, but his eyes sharpened. "I get that," he said evenly. "I've been a trainer for years. I'm just looking for a place to take my workouts seriously." Derek raised an eyebrow, unimpressed. "It's not just about skills. Mr. Taylor, we cater to a select clientele, people who value exclusivity, privacy." There it was. The coded language Daniel had been bracing for. The words hit like a jab, sharp and deliberate. He leaned forward, resting one hand on the counter, his voice still calm but with an edge. "I can afford your membership." Derek's smile was thin, his eyes cold. "It's not about the money, Daniel tilted his head, refusing to let the moment slide. "Then what's it about?" Derek's gaze darted around the room, avoiding Daniel's eyes. "We've had issues before," he said, his voice low. "Certain members. They didn't mesh with the environment we've built here." Daniel straightened, his voice dropping to a controlled simmer. "What exactly are you saying?" "Why, I'm Derek." The gym owner shifted uncomfortably, his facade cracking. "Look, it's not personal. Our members are particular about who they train with. You might find this place isn't the right fit." The words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken meaning. Daniel's patience frayed, but he kept his composure. He'd heard this song and dance before, vague excuses, polite deflections, all masking the same ugly truth. "I get it," he said, his tone sharp but measured. "You're saying I don't belong here." Derek's smile vanished, replaced by a scowl. "I didn't say that." Daniel's eyes locked onto his. "You didn't have to." The air between them crackled with tension. Derek took a step back, his voice hardening. "If you're going to cause a scene, I'll have to ask you to leave. We have a reputation to uphold." Daniel's pulse quickened, but he forced himself to stay calm. "I'm not causing a scene. I'm asking for a membership." Derek's face turned to stone. "We reserve the right to refuse service, and I'm refusing you. If you don't leave, I'll call security." The threat landed like a slap, raw and blatant. Daniel held Derek's gaze for a long moment, the weight of the rejection settling into his bones. He'd come here to train, not to fight this battle, but the sting of it, the casual, coded racism was all too familiar. Without another word, he turned and walked out, the glass doors swinging shut behind him. The cool air lingered on his skin, but his muscles were taut with frustration, not from a workout, but from the fight he hadn't chosen. As he stepped into the sunlight, Daniel exhaled slowly, his breath steadying. This wasn't new. He'd faced doors slammed in his face before, but today felt different. Something inside him had shifted, a spark igniting where resignation used to sit. If Whitman Elite Fitness didn't want him, he'd create a place that did, a gym where everyone belonged. Later that day, Daniel sat across from Julia Morales at their favorite coffee shop, the rich aroma of espresso mingling with the low hum of conversation. His hands gripped his untouched coffee cup, his mind still replaying the encounter at Whitman Elite. Julia, vibrant as ever in her neon crop top and leggings, studied him with a knowing look. She'd been his friend long enough to sense when something was eating at him. "You gonna tell me why you're brooding over that coffee? Or are we just gonna sit here till it gets cold?" she teased, her smile playful but her eyes sharp with concern. Daniel let out a heavy sigh, shaking his head. You ever walk into a place and just know you're not welcome, before anyone even says a word? Julia's eyebrow arched. All the time. "Spill it." "What happened?" Daniel leaned back, his fingers still wrapped around the cup. "I went to Whitman Elite, thought I'd sign up, get serious about my training. The second I walked in, I felt it like I was trespassing. The owner, Derek Whitman, made it crystal clear I didn't fit his image." Julia's eyes narrowed, a spark of anger flaring. "What did he say?" Daniel gave a bitter chuckle. "Started with the usual, we're selective nonsense for all. When I pushed back, he said I didn't mesh with his clientele, even threatened to call security when I called him out." Julia shook her head, her voice sharp. "That's Derek Whitman for you. He's been peddling that exclusive clientele garbage forever. Only rich, white folks get past his velvet rope." Daniel nodded, his jaw tight. "Yeah, I got the message loud and clear." "So what did you do?" Julia asked, her tone softening but still carrying a fire. Daniel shrugged, his eyes distant. "I called him out, but it was like talking to a wall. He wasn't hearing me, he was just waiting for an excuse to kick me out." Julia leaned back, crossing her arms. "And you're sitting here stewing over it. Come on. Daniel, that guy's not worth your energy." Daniel's gaze dropped to the table, his voice quieter now. "It's not just him. I'm mad at myself for thinking I needed his gym. I've been training people for years. I could build something better, something for us, for everyone." Julia's face lit up, a grin spreading across it. "Now that's the Daniel I know. You've been talking about your own gym forever. This isn't about Derek, it's about you finally doing what you were meant to do." Daniel hesitated, doubt creeping in. "It's not that simple. Julia, I'd need a space, equipment, clients. It's a lot." Julia leaned forward, her voice firm but warm. "You don't need to have it all figured out today. But I know you, Daniel. When you set your mind to something, it happens. This isn't just about proving Derek wrong, it's about building something real. You've got the skills, the passion. All you need is a push." Daniel stared at his coffee, her words sinking in. She was right. This dream had been simmering inside him for years, held back by fear and uncertainty. Derek's rejection wasn't the reason for it. It was just the final shove he needed. "I can't do it alone," he said after a long pause. "I'd need help." Julia's grin widened. "You know I've got your back. I've been doing the marketing for clients forever. We'll get your name out there. You're already one of the best trainers in town. People will come if you give them something worth showing up for." Daniel finally took a sip of his coffee, the bitter taste grounding him. A small smile tugged at his lips. "You really think this could work?" "I know it will," Julia said, her confidence infectious. "And once people see what you're building, they won't give Derek's gym a second thought. You're offering something real, something they can't get anywhere else." Daniel leaned back, the weight of the decision settling over him. He'd spent years working in other people's gyms, always dreaming of his own, but never taking the leap. Now, the hesitation that had held him back felt smaller, almost insignificant. He didn't need Derek Whitman's approval or anyone's. He had the skills, the drive, and now the spark to make it happen. All right, he said, setting his cup down with a sense of finality. Let's do this. Julia's grin turned triumphant, and she raised her cup in a mock toast to Daniel Taylor's gym. Daniel clinked his cup against hers, his smile growing. To the future. For the first time that day, the knot in his chest loosened. The anger from Whitman Elite hadn't vanished, but it had shifted into something else: determination. Purpose. As he and Julia left the coffee shop, a fire burned in him. This was the start of something bigger, something he'd control. Weeks later, Daniel stood in the middle of an empty warehouse, the clatter of tools and the hum of a small fan filling the air. Sunlight poured through high windows, casting long shadows across the cracked cement floor. His hands rested on his hips as he surveyed the space. It was rough, bare walls, exposed pipes, and a floor that had seen better days, but to Daniel, it was a blank canvas. He could see it, his gym, a place where anyone could walk through the doors and feel like they belonged. Julia, in her usual workout gear, stood nearby, scrolling through a tablet filled with inventory lists. "You sure about this place?" she asked, glancing up with a skeptical eyebrow. "It's got a potential, but it's a fixer-upper, and that's being generous." Daniel's lips curved into a quiet, confident smile. "It's perfect. It's got good bones, just needs some love." Julia snorted, gesturing at the peeling walls. "Love, Daniel. This place needs a miracle. The plumbing alone's going to keep us up at night." He cut her off, his gaze fixed on the far wall where he envisioned a row of punching bags. "We'll figure it out. This is the spot. It's in the heart of the city. Easy to get to. The community here is growing. We can make this work." Julia sighed but nodded, her trust in him unwavering. "All right, I'm in, but you better brace for some long nights." Daniel's smile widened, a spark of excitement in his eyes. "I've been ready for this my whole life." Daniel stood in the middle of his fledgling gym, a wide grin spreading across his face as he surveyed the modest pile of equipment they'd just acquired. A few secondhand treadmills, some free weights, and a couple of benches sat in the corner. Not much, but enough to spark the dream he'd been chasing. As he crouched to shift one of the benches into place, a voice echoed from the entrance. "Yo, Daniel, you in here, man?" He straightened up and turned to see Tyrone Brooks striding through the door, his infectious grin lighting up the bare space. Tyrone was a towering figure, broad-shouldered and brimming with energy, the kind of guy who could inspire a crowd just by showing up. Dressed in his usual workout gear, a sleeveless hoodie and track pants, he scanned the room with curiosity. "Heard you were finally doing it. Man. Opening your own gym. This place is going to be something," he said, his voice full of excitement. "Slow and steady," Daniel replied, nodding as he wiped sweat from his brow. "You here to lend a hand or just scoping out the competition?" Tyrone let out a hearty laugh, crossing the room to slap Daniel on the back. "You know I had to check out what you're building, man, but I'm not just here to look, I'm ready to work. Point me to something heavy." Daniel's grin widened. "Always room for another set of hands. Grab that end of the bench, will you?" Without missing a beat, Tyrone hoisted the heavy end of the bench like it was nothing, following Daniel's lead to position it just right. From the corner, Julia glanced up from her tablet, where she was juggling spreadsheets and plans for the gym's launch. She gave Tyrone a quick nod, her focus barely breaking. "Gotta say, Tyrone," he called out as they set the bench down, "this place is gonna be real. We don't have anything like this around here. No more driving across town to those overpriced gyms that charge you just to breathe their air." "That's the whole point," Daniel said, brushing his hands on his jeans. "This isn't going to be one of those fancy, exclusive spots. I want people to walk in here and feel like they belong." Tyrone's expression grew serious, his nod slow and deliberate. "You're doing something big. Daniel, people like me, we need this. I tried signing up at Whitman Elite once. You know, walked in, and they looked at me like I was lost. like I didn't belong in their shiny little world. Daniel met Tyrone's gaze, a shared understanding passing between them. "That's why we're here," he said firmly. "People are done feeling like they're not good enough. We're building something different." Julia piped up from her corner, her voice cutting through the moment. "Speaking of building, Daniel, we need to lock down a name. I've got to get the website up and start spreading the word." Daniel paused, rubbing his chin as he thought. Then a spark lit in his eyes. "What about the community gym?" Julia looked up, considering it. "Simple, clear, says exactly what we're about. I like it." "Yeah, man, that's perfect, W," Tyrone added, his grin returning. "That's what this place is, a community." Daniel felt a rush of pride. He'd been tossing names around in his head for weeks, but this one felt right. This gym wasn't just about lifting weights or running on treadmills. It was about creating a space where people could come together, support each other, and feel at home. Tyrone grabbed a rag and started wiping down one of the treadmills. "So you got a timeline for opening, or are we just going to keep hauling in more of this old gear?" Daniel chuckled. "Couple more weeks if everything goes smooth. Still a ton to do, but we're getting there." "Let me know what you need," Tyrone said, tossing the rag over his shoulder. "I'm serious, man. I'm in." Julia smirked, her eyes twinkling. "You sure you're not just fishing for a free membership?" Tyrone flashed a playful grin, flexing his arms dramatically. "Hey, if there's perks, I ain't gonna say no." Daniel laughed, grateful for Tyrone's energy. "You'll get your membership. Man, might even throw in a few training sessions to keep you on my level." "Now you're talking," Tyrone said, striking an exaggerated bodybuilder pose. "Just trying to keep up with you, boss." As the afternoon sun dipped low, casting long shadows across the gym, Daniel and Tyrone kept at it, moving equipment while Julia hammered out the final details for the launch. The space was starting to come together, the skeleton of a dream taking shape. By the time they called it a day, Daniel stood in the center of the room, taking it all in. It was far from finished, but he could see it now, the rows of weights, the hum of treadmills, the people who would fill this place with life. "This is it," he murmured, almost to himself. Julia appeared at his side, placing a hand on his shoulder. "It's happening. Daniel, you've already done the hardest part. You've started." Tyrone stood on his other side, hands on his hips, his smile as wide as ever. "This place is going to be packed. Man, you wait and see." Daniel's chest swelled with determination. "Yeah," he said, his voice steady. "It will be." As they locked up and stepped into the cool evening air, Daniel felt a quiet certainty settle over him. The community gym was more than just a building. It was a promise to everyone who'd ever felt pushed out or overlooked. Here, they'd always have a place. Weeks later, Daniel stood in the center of the community gym, a rag in hand as he surveyed the transformed space. The cracked concrete floor was now covered with sleek rubber mats stretching wall to wall. The bare walls gleamed with fresh white paint, and mirrors lined one side, reflecting the modest but functional setup they'd pieced together: weight racks, secondhand treadmills, punching bags, and a small stretching area. An open sign hung proudly in the window, but the gym was eerily quiet. Too quiet. Daniel had braced himself for a slow start, but the reality was heavier than he'd expected. Bills were piling up: rent, equipment payments, utilities, and memberships were trickling in at a snail's pace. Julia emerged from the back office, where she'd been tweaking their marketing plan. She caught the look on his face and crossed the room, her voice calm but firm. "Don't let it get to you, Daniel. It's only been a couple of weeks. People will come." He sighed, tossing the rag onto a nearby counter. "I know. I just thought we'd have more by now." "What do we have? 5 signups?" "6, Julia corrected, holding up a finger, "and 2 are paying monthly. That's not nothing. Give it time." Daniel nodded, but the pressure was mounting. Time was a luxury they didn't have. If they didn't start pulling in more clients soon, they'd be in serious trouble. Before he could dwell on it, the front door swung open, and Tyrone burst in, his usual grin lighting up the room. "Yo, what's good, fam?" he called, his energy cutting through the silence. "Place looks even better every time I come in." Daniel managed a smile, shaking Tyrone's hand, just trying to keep it moving. "Man, you here to lift?" "Always," Tyrone said, flexing dramatically. "Gotta stay sharp, you know." Julia laughed, shaking her head. "You're too much, Tyrone." "Hey, I bring the vibe," he shot back. "Already heading for the weights. You keep this place running, Daniel, and I'll be here every day. Trust me, people are going to show up." As Tyrone started his warm-up, the door opened again. A few more clients trickled in, an older woman from the neighborhood who'd signed up earlier that week, and a young guy Daniel recognized from a nearby construction site. It wasn't a flood, but it was something. Julia gave him a knowing nod before diving back into her work. She'd been right to keep him grounded, to remind him why they'd started this. It wasn't about instant success. It was about building something that would last. But as the days passed, the financial strain grew harder to ignore. A week later, Daniel sat at the small desk in the back office, staring at a spreadsheet on his laptop. Julia had helped him set it up, but the numbers weren't getting any prettier. They needed more clients, and fast. A knock at the door snapped him out of his thoughts. Julia stepped in, her face lit with excitement as she held up her phone. "Daniel, check this out. That social media post we put up last week, it's starting to take off." He took the phone, scrolling through the comments. Sure enough, there were dozens of likes, shares, and questions about membership rates and hours. "This is good," he said, a flicker of hope igniting. "If we can turn some of this into sign-ups, we might cover next month's rent." "We will," Julia said, her confidence unwavering. "I've been reaching out to local businesses for partnerships, maybe some joint promos. And Tyrone's been hyping us up to all his friends. It's just a matter of time." Daniel nodded, grateful for her optimism. She'd been his anchor through this, always pushing him forward when doubt crept in. He just hoped she was right. Later that afternoon, he was by the squat rack, adjusting weights for Jamal, a new client in his late 20s who joined after hearing about the gym from Tyrone. "You're killing it, Jamal," Daniel said, spotting him as he racked the barbell. "Keep it up." Jamal nodded, catching his breath. "Thanks, man. Appreciate you taking the time to coach me." "That's what this place is for," Daniel said, clapping him on the back. As he moved to help on another client, the front door opened. A man in a crisp business suit stepped inside, his expression unreadable as he surveyed the gym. Daniel didn't recognize him. The man approached, a folder tucked under his arm. "Daniel Taylor." "Yeah, that's me," Daniel said, his tone cautious. "I'm from the city's zoning office," the man said, flipping open the folder. "We've received a complaint about your gym operating without proper permits." Daniel's stomach plummeted. "That's got to be a mistake. We've got all our permits in order." "Not according to our records," the man said, handing him a piece of paper. "You've got 30 days to resolve this, or you'll be forced to shut down." Daniel took the paper, his hands tightening around it. "Who filed the complaint?" he asked, though a sinking feeling told him he already knew. "That's confidential," the man said with a shrug before turning to leave. Daniel stood frozen, his jaw clenched. Julia, who'd overheard, stepped closer, her voice low. "It's got to be Derek." Daniel nodded slowly. "Yeah, he's trying to kill us before we even get off the ground." That evening, after locking up, Daniel and Julia sat in the back office, poring over their paperwork. Everything was in order, just as Daniel had known. The complaint was baseless, but that didn't mean it wouldn't cause headaches. "He's scared," Julia said, flipping through documents. "That's why Derek's doing this. You're a threat to him. He's losing clients, and he knows it." Daniel leaned back, frustration simmering. "I didn't think he'd go this low. We're barely getting started." Julia met his gaze, her expression resolute. "That's exactly why he's doing it. He wants to stop us now, before we get too big. But we're not backing down." Daniel leaned back in his chair, his jaw set as he processed the latest blow. The community gym, his dream, was under siege, and he wasn't about to let it crumble. Not after everything they'd built. not because of Derek Whitman. You're right, he said, his voice steady with renewed resolve. We've come too far to let him tear us down. We'll fight this every step of the way. As they brainstormed their next moves, Daniel felt a fire reignite within him. Derek might have thrown a wrench in their plans, but this gym, this community, wasn't going anywhere. Not if he had anything to say about it. Weeks later, the gym was buzzing with life. Word had spread like wildfire, faster than Daniel could have hoped. What started as a trickle of curious newcomers had swelled into a steady flow of members walking through the doors each day. The gym wasn't bursting at the seams, but the energy was electric, a mix of determination, camaraderie, and sweat. People were drawn to the place, not just for the workouts, but for the sense of belonging. Daniel stood near the front desk, laughing with a couple of regulars, when the door swung open with a force that silenced the room. Derek Whitman strode in, his stocky frame filling the doorway. Dressed in a crisp polo and flashy designer gym shorts, he radiated privilege, his unreadable expression masking something sharp in his eyes. The air shifted, the easygoing vibe replaced by a tense undercurrent. Julia, stationed behind the desk, shot Daniel a quick glance, her eyebrows raised in a silent question. Want me to handle this? Daniel gave a subtle shake of his head. This was his fight. Derek, Daniel said, his tone calm but firm, crossing his arms as he leaned against the counter. Daniel, Derek replied, his voice smooth, his steps slow and deliberate as he closed the distance. Heard a lot about your little gym lately. Seems you're making some noise. Is that right? Daniel kept his cool, his gaze steady. Guess people are talking. They are, Derek said, his eyes sweeping the room, taking in the clanging weights and focused members. A lot of my clients are talking, too. Funny thing they're not showing up at Whitman Elite anymore. Seems they're coming here instead. Daniel didn't flinch. I'm not stealing anyone. Derek, people choose where they want to train. They're coming here because they feel at home. Derek's smile was thin, forced, like a crack in a polished facade. Let's not play games. Daniel, you're running a business just like me, and you're targeting my clients. Targeting Daniel raised an eyebrow, his voice laced with defiance. I open my doors to everyone. Day one, maybe you should ask yourself why your clients are walking away. Derek's smile vanished, his eyes narrowing. You think you're slick, don't you? Starting this place right after I made it clear you didn't belong at my gym. What's your angle, Daniel? What are you trying to prove? I'm not proving anything, Daniel shot back, his voice steady but edged with steel. You told me I didn't fit in at Whitman Elite, so I built my own gym. Simple as that. Derek stepped closer, his voice dropping to a low growl. This won't last. Daniel, you can't compete with Whitman Elite. My gym's got years of reputation, a brand people trust. You're just a guy who tossed some weights in a rundown warehouse. People will get bored. They'll leave. You'll crash and burn. Daniel met Derek's gaze, unflinching. We're not the same. Derek, your gym's for people who care more about flashing their status than breaking a sweat. This place is for people who want to grow, not show off. That's why we're growing. People are done with what you're selling. Derek's face darkened, his frustration boiling over. You're out of your league. Daniel, you don't know what you're up against. Whitman Elite is the top gym in this city. You're playing a game you can't win. Daniel's jaw tightened, his patience fraying. You already tried to shut us down with that fake zoning complaint. Didn't work, did it? Derek's eyes flickered, a fleeting admission of guilt. That was just business. Daniel. Nothing personal. Right, Daniel said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. And when this place keeps growing, what's your next trick? You're running out of moves. For a moment, Derek was silent, his gaze drifting over the gym, lingering on the members, some of whom used to train at Whitman Elite. The sight clearly stung. He hadn't expected Daniel to succeed, let alone thrive. His jaw clenched, and for the first time, Daniel caught a glimpse of doubt in the man's eyes. I'll say this once, Derek said, his voice low and deliberate. Back off. Stop poaching my clients. Stop trying to expand this place. Do that, and maybe you'll keep your doors open another 6 months. Push me, and I'll make sure this gym doesn't last." Daniel's muscles tensed, but he forced himself to stay calm. He straightened, locking eyes with Derek. "You can try, Derek, but I'm not going anywhere. This gym's here to stay, and you can't stop it. If you want to compete, bring it on. But we both know why people are leaving your gym." Derek glared at him, the silence between them heavy with unspoken threats. Then, without a word, he turned and stormed out, the door slamming shut behind him. Daniel let out a slow breath, the tension draining from his shoulders. Julia, who'd been watching the whole exchange, walked over, her arms crossed. "Well," she said, a wry smile tugging at her lips. That was intense. Daniel managed a tight smile, adrenaline still coursing through him. "I knew he'd try something eventually. He's not going to make this easy." "He's scared," Julia said matter-of-factly. "And he should be. People are fed up with his attitude. They're coming here because you've built something real." Daniel nodded, but Derek's words lingered like a storm cloud. Whitman Elite was still a powerhouse in the city, and Derek wasn't the type to back down. This was far from over. That evening, Daniel sat in the back office, staring at the gym's financial reports. Things were looking up, membership numbers were climbing, and the community was growing stronger every day. But they weren't in the clear yet. Derek's confrontation had shaken him more than he wanted to admit. The man's threats weren't empty. With his money and connections, Derek could make life difficult. Julia knocked on the doorframe, her expression softer as she stepped inside. "You okay?" Daniel rubbed the back of his neck, exhaling. "Yeah, just thinking." "He's bluffing," Julia said, leaning against the desk. "He's losing clients left and right, and he's desperate. That's why he showed up. He wants to rattle you." "I know," Daniel said, though the weight in his chest hadn't eased. "But he's got resources we don't. If he really wants to, he can make things messy." Julia crossed her arms, her eyes narrowing. "Maybe, but we've got something he doesn't. Real people who care about this gym. He can't buy that, no matter how much money he throws around." Daniel looked at her, and for the first time since Derek's visit, he felt a flicker of calm. She was right. This gym wasn't just a business, it was a community, something Derek could never replicate. "You're right," he said quietly. "He can't take this from us." Julia grinned, her confidence infectious. "Exactly, Pichon. So don't let him get in your head. We're going to keep growing, and there's nothing he can do about it." Daniel nodded, his determination solidifying. Derek could throw whatever he wanted at them, but the community gym was here to stay. They were just getting started. The weeks that followed were a roller coaster. The gym continued to flourish, drawing in new members from across the city, many of whom had grown disillusioned with the elitism of places like Whitman Elite. Every new sign-up felt like a small victory, proof that they were building something meaningful. But with growth came challenges, and Daniel soon realized Derek wasn't done playing dirty. It started subtly. Equipment orders arrived late, and when they finally showed up, parts were missing or broken. Promotional events Julia had painstakingly planned fell apart at the last minute, with venues pulling out without explanation. Then came the rumors. Daniel overheard members whispering by the water fountain one afternoon. "I heard this place is under investigation," one said, glancing around nervously. "Something about unsafe conditions. A friend of mine almost didn't join because of it." "It's just talk," another member replied, brushing it off. "This place is solid." But the rumors were out there sowing doubt, and Daniel knew exactly who was behind them. One afternoon, Julia stormed into the office, her face shady with frustration as she dropped a stack of papers on Daniel's desk. "We've got another problem," she said, rubbing her temples. Daniel looked up from the membership files he'd been reviewing. "What now?" "Our supplier, Reflex Fitness, just called," Julia said, her voice tight. "They're refusing to deliver our next equipment order. Apparently, they've been told we're not paying our bills." Daniel blinked, stunned. "What, we're up to date on everything. I checked last week." "I know," Julia said, her frustration mirroring his own. But they won't budge. They're saying they've heard we're in financial trouble and don't want to risk delivering equipment we can't pay for. Daniel leaned back in his chair, the pieces clicking into place. Derek. Julia nodded, her expression grim. It's got to be him. He's hitting us from every angle. If he can't shut us down legally, he's going to starve us out by cutting off our supplies. Daniel shook his head, anger simmering beneath the surface. I didn't think he'd stoop this low. Julia leaned forward, her voice steady despite the chaos. We knew he wouldn't back off after the zoning stunt. This is his next move. He's trying to choke us out, make us fail. Daniel stared at the papers, the weight of Derek's sabotage pressing down on him. They'd poured everything into this gym, and now Derek was doing whatever it took to tear it apart. He's scared, Julia continued, echoing her earlier words. That's why he's doing this. But our members, they're loyal. They're spreading the word. That's something he can't take away. Daniel nodded slowly, her words cutting through the fog of frustration. If we can't get the equipment we need, if we can't keep things running smoothly, we will, Julia interrupted, her voice firm. We've come too far to let him win. We'll figure it out. Later that day, Daniel stood in the gym, watching as Tyrone led a group through a high-energy circuit workout. The clank of weights and the rhythm of feet hitting the mats filled the air, a reminder of everything they'd built. Pride swelled in his chest. But Derek's shadow loomed large. Tyrone caught his eye between sets and jogged over, wiping sweat from his forehead. Everything good, man? Tyrone asked, his usual grin fading as he noticed the tension in Daniel's face. Daniel hesitated, then decided to be straight with him. Derek's been messing with us, spreading rumors, cutting off our suppliers, trying to shut us down. Tyrone's expression hardened. That guy just can't let it go, huh? Nope, Daniel said, shaking his head. He's desperate, and it's working. We're hitting roadblocks everywhere. Tyrone crossed his arms, his biceps flexing. We're still here, though. You built this place from the ground up. Daniel, you've got this. I appreciate that, Daniel said, managing a small smile. But it's getting tougher. We can't keep running into these problems and expect to survive. Tier Extranjeros looked around the gym, his eyes lingering on the members' people who'd found a home here. You know why they're here, Daniel, because you gave them something real. Derek can't touch that. Keep fighting. Man, we've got your back. Daniel nodded, Tyrone's words sinking in. Derek might have money and connections, but they had something stronger, a community that believed in what they were building. And no matter what Derek threw at them, Daniel wasn't giving up. The air in the community gym crackled with life, a pulsing energy that drew people in like moths to a flame. It wasn't just the clank of weights or the hum of treadmills, it was the feeling, the intangible magic that made every person who walked through the door feel like they belonged. Daniel stood in the center of it all, watching members laugh, sweat, and push themselves, their faces lit with determination and camaraderie. Tyrone, his right-hand man, clapped him on the shoulder, his voice warm but serious. Man, it's not just the gear, it's this, he said, gesturing to the room. This vibe. Dirk can throw all the cash he wants at his fancy gym, but he'll never have this. Daniel nodded, his mind spinning. Tyrone was right. The gym wasn't just a collection of machines and dumbbells, it was a living, breathing community. A place where people found more than just a workout. But even with that truth burning in his chest, Daniel couldn't ignore the practical side. The gym needed equipment, repairs, supplies, things that cost money they didn't always have. If you need anything, I'm here, Tyrone added, his hand firm on Daniel's back. We're in this together. A flicker of hope sparked in Daniel's chest, and he managed to smile. Thanks, Ty. Means a lot. The next morning, Julia was already behind the front desk when Daniel arrived, her face glowing with an energy that defied the weight of their challenges. She barely let him set his bag down before she launched into her idea. I've got something, she said, her voice brimming with excitement. Daniel raised an eyebrow, intrigued. Let's hear it. Julia leaned forward, her eyes blazing with resolve. We're done playing Dirk's game. He's trying to choke us out, cutting off our suppliers, spreading lies about us. So we flip the script. We turn his attacks into our opportunity. Daniel leaned in. Hooked. How? We double down on what makes us special, Julia said, her words sharp and certain. Our community, our people. We throw a massive open house, invite the whole neighborhood, and make it a celebration of everything this gym stands for. We may not have the shiniest machines, but we've got something Dirk can never by heart. Daniel's mind raced, the pieces falling into place. We show everyone why they come here, he said, catching her vision. Exactly, Julia replied, her smile fierce. We get local businesses involved, offer discounted memberships, run free fitness classes. We make the whole city see that this gym isn't just about lifting weights, it's about lifting each other up. Daniel felt the knot in his chest loosen, replaced by a surge of possibility. This could work. Julia's grin widened. It will work. Dirk can't stop a community that's got our back. The day of the open house arrived, and the gym transformed into a vibrant festival of energy and connection. The space buzzed with life, neighbors of all ages poured in, some hitting the weights, others mingling at booths set up by local vendors. Daniel wove through the crowd, shaking hands, answering questions, and soaking in the joy that filled the room. In one corner, Tyrone led a high-energy workout session, his voice booming with encouragement as he urged the group to dig deep. At the front desk, Julia signed up new members and handed out flyers, her enthusiasm infectious. This wasn't just a gym anymore. It was a movement, a defiant celebration of everything they'd built in the face of Dirk's attempts to tear them down. By the time the sun set, Daniel was bone-tired but buzzing with adrenaline. They'd signed up over a dozen new members, forged partnerships with local businesses, and reminded everyone why the community gym mattered. Julia joined him by the door as the last stragglers left, her face flushed with triumph. That, she said, wiping sweat from her brow, was a win. Daniel nodded, a deep satisfaction settling in his bones. We're not just hanging on, Julia. We're thriving. She grinned, her voice thick with pride. And Dirk can't touch that. In the weeks that followed, the gym became a beacon of energy. New members flooded in and old ones brought friends, drawn by the sense of belonging that permeated the space. One morning, Daniel walked in, coffee in hand, and stopped short. The gym was packed, every station occupied, every corner alive with chatter and effort. A few months ago, he'd worried about empty rooms. Now they were scrambling to make space for everyone. Tyrone was by the squat rack, coaching a group through their sets, his voice a steady drumbeat of motivation. Julie was at the desk, helping two new members with their paperwork, her smile as bright as ever. The gym was a tapestry of diversity, people of all ages, backgrounds, and fitness levels, united by a shared sense of purpose. It was everything Daniel had dreamed of and more. But as the community gym soared, whispers began to circulate about Dirk's gym, Whitman Elite Fitness. Later that day, Julia burst into the office, her phone clutched in her hand and a gleam in her eye. You need to see this, she said, handing it over. Daniel scrolled through a flood of messages from members, all saying the same thing: they were leaving Whitman Elite. Some cited the snobbery, others the sterile, unwelcoming atmosphere. The pattern was unmistakable. They're coming here, Daniel said, the weight of it sinking in. Julia nodded, her expression triumphant. People are talking, Daniel. They're saying this is the place where they feel at home. Dirk's losing his hold. Daniel set the phone down, his thoughts racing. Whitman Elite had been the city's crown jewel for years, a playground for the rich and powerful. But status alone couldn't keep people coming back, not when they craved connection, not when they wanted a place that felt like theirs. Is it wrong that I'm kinda enjoying this? He asked, a grin creeping across his face. Julia laughed, her voice light. Not at all, but you earned this, Daniel. You didn't just build a gym, you built a family. Dirk can't compete with that. Days later, the gym was bursting at the seams, even during the usually quiet midday hours. The free weights were in constant use, the treadmills hummed, and the punching bags took a beating from a group of regulars. Daniel stood by the front desk, marveling at the growth. Tyrone jogged over, his grin wide. Man, we're gonna need more equipment. This place is exploding. Daniel chuckled, wiping sweat from his brow. Tell me about it. We've got more people than we know what to do with. Tyrone's eyes sparkled with pride. Good problem to have. But we're gonna need a bigger space soon. People love this place. Daniel's chest swelled. The gym wasn't just a business anymore. It was a movement. A sanctuary where people from every walk of life could come to grow, to belong. But before he could respond, the door swung open, and a familiar figure stepped inside Dirk Whitman. The smug swagger Daniel remembered was gone, replaced by a tense, almost desperate air. Dirk's eyes swept the room, taking in the crowd, the laughter, the undeniable life that filled the space. For a fleeting moment, Daniel almost pitied him. Dirk approached, his jaw tight. Daniel braced himself, expecting another clash, but Dirk's tone was different this time, quieter, less certain. So, he said, glancing around again, this is what you've built. Daniel nodded, steady. Yeah, this is cyanide. This is it. Dirk's gaze lingered on the gym floor, the clatter of weights and bursts of laughter filling the silence. He said nothing for a long moment, and Daniel could see the wheels turning in his head. This wasn't the same man who'd swaggered in months ago. Certain Daniel's gym would crumble. Finally, Dirk spoke, his voice low. You think this is gonna last? Daniel met his eyes, unflinching. I know it will. Dirk scoffed, but there was no venom in it. Only a hollow edge. You think a crowd means you've won? This isn't about winning, Daniel said, his voice calm but firm. It's about building something real. People are done with places like yours. Dirk, they don't want to feel like they're not enough. That's why they're here. A shadow passed over Dirk's face, a flicker of anger, but not at Daniel. It was aimed inward, at the cracks in his own empire. You don't get it, Dirk muttered. Whitman Elite isn't just a gym, it's a legacy, built over years. What you've got here, it's a flash in the pan. Daniel stood taller, unshaken. Maybe it took you years to build your gym, but you forgot the heart of it. This place works because it's about people, not profit. That's why we're growing, and that's why you're losing. Dirk fell silent, his eyes scanning the room one last time, as if searching for something he'd lost. The pride he'd once carried was gone, replaced by the dawning truth that no amount of money or prestige could rival what Daniel had created. Without another word, Dirk turned and walked out, the door swinging shut behind him. That evening, Daniel and Julia sat in the back office, the hum of the gym still alive in the background. They hadn't spoken much since Dirk's visit, both processing the weight of the moment. Julia broke the silence, her voice soft. Do you think that's it? Is he done? Daniel leaned back, exhaling. I don't know, but it doesn't matter anymore. We're not looking over our shoulder at him. We're building something bigger. Julia's smile was warm, certain. You're right. He can't stop this. We're just getting started. Daniel felt the truth of her words settle deep. Whitman Elite might have ruled the city once, but that era was fading. The community gym was the future, a place where people found not just fitness, but family. For the first time, Daniel felt free of Dirk's shadow. He hadn't set out to tear Whitman Elite down. He'd simply built something stronger, something true. As the gym emptied out that night, Daniel stood by the door, watching the last members leave. The future stretched out before him, brimming with promise. Dirk might have been part of the story, but the community gym was his legacy, and it was only the beginning. Weeks later, the gym was a whirlwind of growth. Membership had more than doubled, and the space thrummed with energy from dawn to dusk. Daniel and Julia were already dreaming of expansion, maybe a bigger space to hold the swelling crowd. During a training session with new members, Daniel caught sight of a familiar figure outside the glass door. Dirk Whitman, pacing, his face taut with tension. The arrogance Daniel once knew was gone, replaced by a nervous edge. Wiping sweat from his brow, Daniel told the group to take a break and steeled himself as Dirk stepped inside, his presence stirring a mix of curiosity and wariness. The gym hummed with life, a vibrant pulse of energy that filled the air with the clatter of weights, the rhythm of footsteps on treadmills, and the warm laughter of people pushing each other to be better. It was a place where sweat and smiles mingled, where strangers became friends, and where everyone belonged. At the front desk, Julia's sharp eyes caught Daniel's as a familiar figure stepped through the door. Her look carried a warning, a silent, "Here comes trouble." Daniel gave her a subtle nod, his calm demeanor signaling that he had this under control. Derek Whitman's presence cast a shadow, but it no longer held the power it once did. Derek's steps were slow, almost cautious. As he entered the gym, his eyes darted around, taking in the crowded space with a flicker of something that looked like envy. The community gym was alive in a way his own Whitman elite never could be: authentic, welcoming, electric. People of all backgrounds moved together, cheering each other on, their energy a stark contrast to the sterile, elitist atmosphere of Derek's world. He approached Daniel, his voice softer than Daniel had ever heard, tinged with a hesitance that felt foreign coming from someone so used to commanding a room. "Daniel, we need to talk." Daniel crossed his arms, standing tall, his presence steady and unyielding. "About what?" Derek took a deep breath, his gaze flickering around the room again, as if searching for something to anchor him. "I've been thinking about everything. The way I treated you, the way I ran my gym. It's obvious now that I screwed up." His voice cracked slightly, the weight of his words betraying the strain he was under. "I've lost members, Daniel, more than I ever imagined. People are leaving Whitman Elite, and they're coming here. They want what you've got. I see that now." Daniel's eyebrow arched, but he stayed silent, watching Derek closely. This was new Derek admitting fault, his pride crumbling in real time. But Daniel wasn't ready to trust it. Not yet. "So, what exactly are you saying, Derek?" he asked, his tone even but firm, cutting through the air like a blade. Derek shifted uncomfortably, his usual confidence nowhere to be found. "I'm saying we could help each other. Partner up. You've got this community, this energy. I've got resources, a name people know. If we join forces, we could own this city. Open gyms everywhere. I was wrong to push you away before. Daniel, I get it now. Together, we could be unstoppable." The words hung in the air, heavy with possibility and temptation. Daniel let them linger, his eyes locked on Derek's. He'd seen this coming, but hearing it out loud still hit like a punch. A partnership with Derek meant growth, money, influence, everything the world said a successful business should chase. But that wasn't why Daniel had poured his heart into this gym. He leaned forward slightly, his voice low and deliberate. "Let me make sure I'm hearing you right. You want me to forget everything you've done, everything you've said, and team up with you?" Derek's jaw tightened, but he nodded, his desperation barely masked. "Yes, I know I messed up, but I'm ready to move forward. We could build something bigger than either of us ever dreamed." Daniel exhaled, a faint shake of his head betraying his disbelief. "You really don't get it, do you?" Derek blinked, caught off guard. "What?" "This gym," Daniel said, his voice steady but burning with a conviction, "isn't about money or power. It's not just a business. It's a home for people who've been pushed out, told they don't belong. People like me, people like them." He gestured toward the gym's members, who were too immersed in their workouts and conversations to notice the tense exchange unfolding near the entrance. "You didn't just turn me away from your gym, Derek. You looked at the color of my skin and decided I wasn't good enough. You didn't even try to hide it. You treated me like I was nothing. And now, because your world's falling apart, you think I'll just forget that, stand next to you like it never happened?" Derek's face hardened, but the desperation in his eyes grew sharper. "I was wrong, hello. Daniel, I see that now." "Racist," Daniel cut in, his voice calm but unyielding. "You were racist, and you're not just losing members because this gym is better. You're losing them because people saw who you really are. They don't want to be part of a place built on exclusion and arrogance. Derek's cheeks flushed, but he didn't push back. For once, he had no defense, no slick comeback. Daniel pressed on, his words steady and resolute. I built this place because people like you tried to keep people like me out. This gym stands for everything you and Whitman Elite never could: community, inclusion, heart, and I'm not about to partner with someone who only shows up when he's scared of losing. I don't need your money, your resources, or your so-called reputation. We're already winning without you. Derek swallowed hard, his shoulders slumping as the weight of Daniel's words settled over him. So that's it. Then, Daniel nodded, his gaze unwavering. That's it. You're not welcome here. Derek, not now, not ever. For a long moment, Derek stood frozen, staring at Daniel as if struggling to process the finality of it all. But Daniel didn't waver, his resolve a wall that Derek couldn't break through. Finally, Derek let out a heavy breath, his shoulders sagging further. I see. Guess there's nothing more to say. No, Daniel said softly, his voice carrying a quiet strength. There isn't. Derek turned, his steps slow and heavy as he made his way to the door. He paused for a moment, his hand resting on the handle, as if some part of him wanted to turn back, to find one last thing to say. But no words came. Without looking back, he pushed the door open and stepped out, the door closing behind him with a sound that seemed to echo through the gym. Final and absolute. Daniel stood there, letting the moment sink in. This wasn't about revenge or proving a point. It was about standing up for what mattered, for the people who had been told they didn't belong, for the community he'd built from nothing. Derek Whitman had tried to break him, to keep him down, and now Derek was the one walking away, empty-handed. Julia stepped up beside him, her presence warm and steady. That felt good, didn't it? Daniel nodded, a small smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. Yeah, it did. You did the right thing, she said, her voice soft but certain. He doesn't deserve to be part of this. I know, Daniel replied, his eyes still fixed on the door. This place isn't for people like him, and now everyone knows it. Julia's words hung in the air, a quiet affirmation of everything Daniel had fought for. As the gym buzzed around them, alive with the sounds of effort, laughter, and connection, Daniel felt the weight of the moment lift. He'd built something real, something that no amount of money or power could buy. This gym was more than a place to work out. It was a testament to what happened when people came together, when they refused to let hate or exclusion define them. Derek was gone, his shadow no longer looming. The community gym stood strong, a beacon of hope and resilience, and Daniel knew it would only grow brighter from here.